Hello and welcome to the English Speaking Studio. I'm Jack, your co-host.
And I'm Lucy.
Well, all right, back again for another deep dive with us. And this one's going to be kind of meta.
Yeah.
Because you are a podcaster yourself.
Okay.
And looking for some tips on how to help non-native English speakers, really boost their skills.
I see.
Especially thinking about practical stuff like work travel.
Right.
And all the things that go with that pronunciation, fluency, vocabulary.
All 9 yards.
Yeah, exactly. The whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
And you want to make it, cheerful, fun, interactive.
Of course.
The idioms, use examples from media, really show how learning English can be enjoyable and also super practical.
Absolutely.
So the source that you sent us is very interesting.
Okay.
It's an episode called Digital Detox, Reclaiming Your Life from Technology. And it's from a podcast called English Speaking Studio.
Interesting.
It's a little bit ironic.
Yeah.
But
using technology to get away from technology.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you're probably thinking, what does a digital detox have to do with my language learning podcast?
Right.
But I think we get some good stuff from this.
I think so too. Yeah. What's really neat is that this episode kind of shows exactly what you're going for.
Okay.
With your own show.
Yeah.
Like simple language, conversational, breaks it down. So it's perfect for non-native speakers.
Okay, cool. So let's get into some specifics.
Sure.
One thing that really stood out to me was how they use these short active sentences.
Right.
So instead of saying something like, the utilization of digital devices can be detrimental to one's well-being,
Oh my goodness.
they'll just say, too much screen time can be bad for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Much easier to understand. It's
Yeah.
avoiding all that jargon.
Right.
The complex grammar makes things much more accessible.
Yeah, and that's something you can definitely apply to your own podcast as well.
Mm-hmm.
So think about, how you can rephrase things using simpler vocabulary, sentence structures.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing they do well is that clear pronunciation, especially on those, important terms.
Mm-hmm.
So like when they first bring up digital detox,
Yes.
they pronounce each syllable very clearly.
Yes, they do.
It's almost like they slow down just a little bit
It's true.
to let the listener really process that word.
And I think, for non-native speakers, that's very helpful.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like they're subtly highlighting those key terms.
Yes.
So what other pronunciation tips did you kind of pick up from this episode?
Well, I also noticed the rhythm and intonation of their speech. They vary their pitch and pace, which not only makes them sound more engaging, but it also helps highlight the important words and phrases. It's like they're guiding the listener's ear to what's most important.
Yeah, and I think that's something that a lot of language learners really struggle with.
They do.
Is, the musicality of the language.
Right.
Not just about pronouncing the words correctly.
Right. But delivering them in a way that just sounds very natural and engaging.
It's true. And that's something that, you can model for your listeners as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Don't be afraid to play around with intonation, your rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
Record yourself. Listen back. See if you can find areas where you can be more expressive.
I love that.
Yeah.
All right, so we talked about, clear language pronunciation.
Yes.
Let's talk about vocabulary.
Okay.
Especially idioms and expressions,
Yes.
which I know is something you want to incorporate.
Yes.
And I noticed that they use them in this episode throughout the conversation.
Yeah. So, for example, they use the phrase, take a step back,
Mm-hmm.
To mean gaining perspective on your technology use.
Right.
And they don't just use the idiom, they also explain it,
Right.
which is really crucial for those non-native speakers.
Yeah, because if you just hear it in passing,
Right.
you might not really grasp the meaning.
That's true.
So by explaining it,
Yeah.
you're really teaching them how to use it correctly. Exactly.
And that goes back to, one of your main goals,
Mm.
making English learning practical
Yes.
for real life.
Yes.
And idioms are a big part of that.
They are.
So you can teach them effectively.
Mm-hmm.
You're giving your listeners the tools they need to really navigate those situations.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've done clear language pronunciation.
Uh-huh.
Let's move on to the structure of the episode.
Okay.
One thing that impressed me was how they broke down this whole concept of digital detox into these bite-sized chunks.
Right. They don't overwhelm the listener with too much at once.
Right.
They start by explaining what a digital detox is.
Right.
Then they'll move on to the reasons why someone might need one.
Mm-hmm.
Then some practical steps to take.
Uh-huh.
And finally, the benefits.
Right, and it's very sequential.
It is.
And it's almost like they're taking you on this guided tour
Right, exactly.
of this topic.
Yes.
And they even use elements of storytelling.
That's true.
Like they'll share anecdotes about people who have done this.
That's right. Right.
Really, had good results.
And it just helps to add that human element to the information, so it's more relatable. And it also breaks up those more technical parts.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like a lecture or anything.
It doesn't. It's very conversational.
Yeah. So we're seeing this combination of structure, bite-sized information, storytelling.
Yes.
All these things that make it really easy to follow.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, for non-native speakers.
Absolutely.
So how can your podcast learn from this?
Well, think about how you can chunk your content into logical sections.
Right.
Use clear transitions. Maybe incorporate stories or anecdotes to make it more engaging, memorable.
Yeah. It's about finding that balance.
Yeah.
Between giving people information, but also making it entertaining.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key element.
Okay.
That cheerful, interactive tone that you mentioned.
Right.
How do you think this episode achieves that?
Well, I think it starts with the hosts. They just have this great rapport.
Yeah, they do.
Their energy is infectious.
It is.
They sound like they're genuinely enjoying the conversation.
That's true.
And that comes across to the listener.
It really does.
It's contagious.
Yes, it is. It's contagious. And it's not just their tone of voice.
Right.
It's how they interact with each other. They ask each other questions.
Yeah.
They build on each other's points. They even tease each other playfully.
Exactly.
Yes.
It's like you're listening in on two friends.
It is.
Who are just experts on this topic.
Yeah, and that's the kind of vibe you want to create.
Yeah, absolutely.
Establish that connection with your listeners. Make them feel like they're part of the conversation.
Right. So we talked about clear language, engaging structure, that cheerful, interactive tone.
Yeah.
Before we move on, though, I just want to highlight something that I think is really important.
Okay.
And that is the relevance of the topic.
Oh, what do you mean?
So this episode is about digital detox, right? And that is incredibly relevant to your target audience.
It is, yeah.
Because everyone these days,
especially those learning English.
Or
interacting with technology on a daily basis.
They are. They're using their smartphones, their computers, they're on social media.
Yes, they are.
And they're likely encountering all the same challenges and benefits that this episode talks about.
It's true. That's a great point.
So you're not only providing language learning opportunities, but you're also addressing a topic that is directly relevant to their lives.
Absolutely.
It's like killing two birds with one stone.
It is. It's a double dose of learning.
Right. They're improving their English.
Yeah.
But they're also gaining these insights into how to manage their digital lives.
Absolutely.
And that brings us to a really interesting question.
Okay.
How can you apply this to your own podcast?
Right.
What other topics would resonate with your listeners?
Right.
Like provide those rich language learning opportunities.
That's where things get really fun.
Yeah.
So many possibilities.
Yeah.
But before we get into those, let's take a quick pause, gather our thoughts, and then when we come back, we can brainstorm some more.
Sounds good to me.
We'll
be right back.
And we are back, ready to brainstorm.
I love it.
So, we were talking about how important it is to choose those relevant topics. And this digital detox episode, kind of got me thinking.
Yeah.
What other everyday things can we use for language learning?
Yeah, because we all have to deal with travel.
Right.
Work relationships, just navigating a new city.
It's true. All fantastic starting points.
Yeah.
So let's say you do an episode about travel.
Okay.
You could cover practical phrases, booking flights, asking for directions.
Right.
Ordering food.
Yeah.
All things your listeners will actually use.
And you could throw in some idioms, too.
Yeah. Of course, hit the road.
Yeah, or get lost.
Yeah, but in a good way.
In a good way, yeah.
And
you could even weave in some cultural insights.
Yeah.
Like how to greet people in different countries.
That's a great idea.
You know what the customs are?
Yes. And that is brilliant because you're not just teaching vocabulary.
Right.
You're giving them a cultural toolkit.
Yeah.
So they'll feel much more confident interacting with people from different backgrounds.
Right. It's like giving them the secret decoder ring.
It is. To the world.
To the world, yes. All right, so travel is a great one.
Yes.
What about work?
Work. Yeah.
I know a lot of your listeners are professionals trying to, get ahead in their careers.
Absolutely.
And improve their English for that.
Yes. So for a work-themed episode, you could focus on things like email etiquette,
Oh, yeah.
Presenting ideas in meetings, negotiating a salary. You know.
Yeah, those are great.
Really think about the language they'll need to succeed.
Yeah, and you could even do a segment where you break down common business idioms.
Of course. Things like think outside the box.
Yes, or get down to business.
Exactly.
All those phrases that just make you sound like a pro.
Yes. You know what? To make it even more interactive,
Okay.
you could even have like a little quiz.
Oh, yeah?
Or a role-playing scenario.
Oh, I love that.
Where they can practice using those idioms.
Yeah.
Make sure they really understand.
That's a really good idea.
The meaning and how to use them correctly.
I'm getting excited about all these possibilities.
Me too.
Travel, work. What other real-life topics?
Oh, you know, something as simple as like ordering food at a restaurant.
Oh, yeah.
You could teach vocabulary for different cuisines, explain how to make special requests.
Right.
Or even talk about like tipping customs.
Ooh, that's a good one.
In different cultures.
Yeah, and you can even make it funny.
Of course.
Like, what do you say if you accidentally spill your drink?
Oh, that's a good one.
Or how do you politely tell someone you don't like their cooking?
Yeah, exactly.
Just little things like that.
It's a great way to lighten the mood and make the learning process more enjoyable.
Because humor is a universal language.
It really is.
So we have all these great topics.
We do.
But how do we make sure that the episodes are not only informative,
right,
but really engaging and easy to follow?
Yeah.
What techniques can we borrow from this digital detox episode?
Well, you know, they do a really good job of using clear transitions to guide the listener. So phrases like, now let's move on to, or here's a tip for, you know. So it just signals what's coming next.
Right, so it's like signposts.
It is.
To make sure nobody gets lost.
Exactly. And then that interactive conversational tone we talked about. How can we make sure that's in every episode?
Right.
One technique they use really well is they'll ask questions directly to the listener.
Okay.
Like, have you ever experienced this? What would you do in this situation?
I like that.
And it just makes the listener feel like they're part of the conversation.
Right. They're not just passively listening.
They're not.
They're actually having to think about it.
It encourages them to think critically and apply what they're learning.
Right. It's not just about memorizing vocabulary.
It's not.
It's about being able to use it.
Exactly. And don't forget the power of storytelling.
Oh, yeah.
You know, weaving in personal anecdotes or stories from your listeners can really add that authenticity.
Right. You're building a community.
Yes. It's a shared journey of language discovery.
I love that.
So it's not just a podcast. It's something more.
Okay, so we have our clear transitions. We have our questions, our stories.
Yes.
Now, what about that fun segment you mentioned?
Yes. The quiz or Q&A.
Right. How do we make that a regular thing?
Well, you know, you could have a different type of activity each week.
Okay.
Like maybe one week it's a guess the idiom quiz. Another week it's like a would you rather scenario.
Oh, I love that.
Where they have to choose the best response in English.
Yeah.
You could even take questions from your listeners.
Oh, yeah.
Answer them live on the show.
I like that. That makes them feel like they're part of it.
Exactly. It's a great way to get them involved and address their specific needs.
I think we're onto something here.
I think so, too.
Okay. So we have our topics, other techniques. We have our interactive elements.
We do.
But before we get too carried away, let's talk about wrapping things up.
Okay. How to end.
Yes. How do we leave our listeners feeling motivated and inspired?
Yes. A strong closing is just as important as a strong opening.
It really is.
So what did you think of the closing in this episode?
I thought it was good. They summarized the key takeaways.
They did.
Offered a final piece of advice. And ended on a very uplifting note.
They did, encouraging listeners to take action.
Yes. So it wasn't just like, see you next time.
It wasn't.
It was like a call to action.
It was.
What are some other ways that we can create that motivational closing?
Well, you could share an inspiring quote.
Okay.
Related to language learning. Highlight a success story from one of your listeners.
Oh, I like that.
Or even offer a challenge for the week ahead.
Those are really good.
Just something to leave them feeling empowered.
Right, and excited to keep going.
Exactly.
You know what's funny?
What?
We've been so focused on analyzing this episode.
Yes, we have.
That we haven't even talked about the fact that you're already doing a lot of this.
Wait, what do you mean?
In your own podcast.
Right?
You are.
Huh.
Think about it. You're using clear language.
Oh.
You're incorporating humor.
Okay.
You're engaging with your listeners.
Oh.
You're putting a lot of these techniques into practice.
Wow, you're right. It's funny how sometimes we need to take a step back
I know.
and look at our own work.
Yeah.
to appreciate what we're doing well.
Absolutely. And that's a good lesson in itself.
It is.
It's not about being perfect.
Right.
It's about recognizing our strengths and building on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what are some of your strengths as a language learning podcaster?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
It is a tough one.
What do I do well?
Think about it. Sometimes it's easier to see those strengths in others.
True.
From what I've gathered, you're really good at, taking those complex grammar concepts and just breaking them down into these little bite-sized pieces that are really easy to understand.
Yeah, I do try to make grammar less intimidating.
You do.
It can be a hurdle.
It is.
For a lot of learners.
Yeah, so you definitely succeed at that.
Okay, good.
And you have a way of explaining things with just such clarity and patience. Like you're right there with your listeners every step of the way.
I guess my teaching background comes in handy.
Maybe.
I always try to put myself in the learner's shoes.
I think that's great.
And just anticipate what might be confusing.
And that empathy really comes through in your podcast.
Well, thank you.
You know what else?
What?
You have a great sense of humor.
Oh, thanks.
You don't take yourself too seriously.
No, I don't.
And that makes the learning process so much more enjoyable.
It should be fun.
It should be.
Yeah.
It really should.
Even when we're talking about grammar.
Yeah, even grammar can be fun.
It can be, yeah.
And you're not afraid to get creative with your content.
Try not to be.
You use music, you use sound effects, you do role-playing.
Yeah, I think those elements really help to break up that monotony.
They do.
Keep people engaged.
Keep it interesting, yeah.
Plus, it's just a great way to showcase different aspects of the language.
Right.
Like the intonation, the rhythm,
exactly.
the pronunciation.
It's like you're creating this whole multi-sensory experience.
Oh, I like that.
It's not just teaching. It's like you're building this world of English.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah, for your listeners to immerse themselves in.
I like that a lot.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you've given me a whole new perspective.
I'm glad.
I never thought of it that way before.
It's amazing what a little deep dive can reveal, right?
Yes, it is. So
we've explored all these great techniques, these ideas. I'm curious, what's your biggest takeaway from all of this?
Okay.
What's the one thing you're going to focus on for your next episode?
I think for me, the biggest takeaway is choosing those relevant topics.
Okay.
It's not enough to just teach the grammar and the vocabulary in isolation. We need to connect it to real life.
Exactly.
To those situations that our listeners can relate to.
Yeah. You had so many good ideas for those real-life topics.
Yeah.
Travel, work, food, even navigating a new city.
It's true.
I mean, the possibilities really are endless.
They are.
And I think, you're already doing so much. But by incorporating even more of these things, I think your podcast is just going to become even more popular.
Right. Well, I hope so.
And impactful.
I feel very inspired and motivated.
I love to hear that.
To put all this into practice.
And remember, as you go on this journey,
you're
not alone.
Oh, that's good to know.
There's this whole community of language learning podcasters out there.
I didn't even realize.
Who are eager to support you, collaborate.
Yeah.
So don't be afraid to,
reach out. Connect.
Share your ideas, learn from each other.
That's great advice. I'm definitely going to do that.
And most importantly, have fun.
Oh, of course.
Gotta have fun.
Let that passion shine through.
Okay.
And your listeners will feel it.
Right, because learning a language should be exciting.
It really should.
And rewarding.
It's an adventure.
It is.
It is. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for all the insights.
It's been a pleasure.
And guidance.
Deep diving with you.
It's been fun. And to all our listeners out there.
Yes.
We hope you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes look at the world of language learning podcasts.
Absolutely.
Remember, no matter where you are on your journey,
keep learning.
Keep exploring. Keep practicing.
Yes.
And most importantly, never stop having fun.
Never.
That's a wrap on another deep dive.
So great.
We'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration.
Sounds good.
Of the world of knowledge and ideas.